For many years, a little-known trade rule called the de minimis exemption was the secret engine powering the global e-commerce boom. This provision allowed small packages to enter the United States without facing tariffs or customs duties, as long as their declared value was below a certain threshold. For a long time, this threshold was relatively low. However, a change in 2016 raised it to $800, a move that supercharged international online shopping. This change meant that American consumers could order goods from businesses all over the world, Mexico, Europe, Asia, and beyond, and have them delivered directly to their doorsteps without the hassle or expense of import taxes. It was a simple, efficient system that fueled a massive surge in direct-to-consumer shipments. The logic behind the de minimis rule was practical. Processing duties on millions of small, low-value items would create a logistical nightmare for U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The cost of collecting the tax would often exceed the tax revenue itself. By waiving these duties, the government streamlined the flow of goods, reduced administrative burdens, fostered a vibrant global marketplace. Small businesses in other countries gained direct access to the vast American market, and U.S. shoppers enjoyed an unprecedented variety of products at competitive prices. This exemption became a cornerstone of modern e-commerce, making international borders feel almost invisible for the average online shopper. A small artisan in Oaxaca, Mexico, could sell handcrafted goods directly to a customer in Ohio. A boutique clothing store in Italy could ship a dress to a buyer in California with the same ease as a domestic retailer. This ease of trade democratized commerce, allowing businesses of all sizes to participate in the global economy. The $800 de minimis threshold was one of the most generous in the world, turning the United States into the most attractive destination for international e-commerce sellers. As a result, millions of packages flowed into the U.S. every day under this exemption. In the last year alone, records show that over 1.3 billion packages with a combined value of approximately $64.6 billion entered the country duty-free. This massive volume highlights just how integral the de minimis provision had become to the daily lives of American consumers and the business models of countless international companies. The era of easy, duty-free international shopping came to an abrupt and dramatic halt. On August 29, 2025, an executive order from President Donald Trump ended the de minimis exemption for all countries. Effective immediately, all imported goods, regardless of their value, would be subject to U.S. duties and tariffs. The nearly century-old rule that let packages under $800 enter tax-free was eliminated overnight. The executive order was a powerful unilateral move. Trump invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law rarely used this way. That let the White House bypass a longer congressional repeal that had been scheduled for 2027. In a direct and immediate consequence of President Trump's executive order, Correos de Mexico made a stunning announcement. It declared that it was suspending all package shipments to the United States, effective immediately. The Postal Service cited deep uncertainty surrounding the termination of the de minimis exemption as the primary reason for the halt. With the rule change set to take effect in just a matter of days, the Postal Authority found itself in an untenable position. It had no system in place to comply with the sudden demand to collect U.S. import duties on behalf of the American government. For the countless small packages it processed daily, the decision was one of logistical necessity, not political protest. The infrastructure of international mail is built on long-standing agreements and standardized processes. The sudden requirement to assess U.S. tariffs, collect U.S. tariffs, remit U.S. tariffs on every single package presented an insurmountable operational hurdle. Postal workers would effectively be turned into U.S. tax collectors. They would need to determine tariff rates, process payments from senders, transfer funds to U.S. authorities. Faced with this complex and costly burden, suspending service was the only viable short-term option. This shutdown affects a significant volume of cross-border commerce. Large-scale freight and trucking have their own customs procedures. The Postal Service is the lifeblood for small businesses, artisans, individuals. For many Mexican entrepreneurs who rely on Etsy and eBay, postal mail was the most affordable way to reach American customers. The suspension cuts them off from their largest market, jeopardizing livelihoods and severing long-built economic ties. Families sending gifts and personal items are also caught in this disruption, unable to use the most common method of shipment. The move underscores the fundamental challenge posed by the new U.S. policy. The administration's order effectively outsourced tariff collection to foreign entities without consent or preparation. It assumed postal services could adapt instantly to a new regulatory framework. Mexico's response shows that assumption was flawed. The shutdown is a real-world consequence of the policy shift, a tangible barrier that has brought a key channel of U.S.-Mexico commerce to a standstill. Mexico was not alone in its decision to halt shipments. The fallout from the termination of the de minimis exemption quickly cascaded across the globe, creating a widespread disruption in international mail services. In the days leading up to the August 29th deadline, a growing list of countries announced that their postal services would also be suspending package shipments to the United States. This was not a coordinated action but rather a series of independent decisions made by national postal authorities facing the same logistical impossibility. The sudden policy change in Washington had triggered a global chain reaction, isolating the American consumer from a significant portion of the world's e-commerce market. The list of countries suspending services was extensive and geographically diverse. Many European nations which have a robust direct-to-consumer trade relationship with the U.S. were among the first to act. They were soon joined by major economic partners in the Asia-Pacific region: Japan, India, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand. The common thread was the inability to comply with the new mandate. Letters, documents, certain gift items continued, but commercial goods, which constitute the bulk of e-commerce, were largely barred. This global postal shutdown reveals the interconnectedness of the modern supply chain and its vulnerability to sudden policy shifts. For years, consumers and businesses had operated under the assumption that sending a small package across the world was a straightforward process. For American shoppers, the consequences of the de minimis repeal were felt almost immediately. Online orders that had been placed just days or weeks before the deadline were suddenly canceled. International sellers could no longer guarantee delivery. The flow of affordable goods from abroad dried up overnight. Clothing, electronics, handmade crafts, specialty foods. Consumers who had grown accustomed to endless choice were now facing a much more limited and expensive marketplace. Many were left frustrated and confused as their favorite international stores could no longer ship to U.S. addresses. The financial impact extends beyond canceled orders. For packages that do manage to get through via private carriers or via reopened postal channels, the cost to the consumer will rise significantly. Every item, no matter how inexpensive, will now have a tariff applied to it. In addition, carriers will likely charge new administrative or brokerage fees to handle customs paperwork. A $20 item ordered from overseas could suddenly cost $25 after duties and fees, or even $30 once all fees are included. That price increase effectively negates the benefits of shopping from international sellers. Small businesses in the United States are also caught in the crossfire. Trade experts and former government officials have been quick to point out the chaotic nature of the policy's implementation. Josh Teitelbaum, an international trade specialist at Akin and former commerce official, highlighted the widespread confusion on a global scale. He noted that the abrupt change has left foreign governments, postal services, businesses scrambling to understand and adapt to their new, undefined roles as United States tariff collectors. This lack of a clear, phased-in transition plan has been a primary driver of the service suspensions, as entities chose to halt shipments rather than risk non-compliance with poorly understood regulations. According to experts, the core problem is the logistical challenge of processing millions of low-value shipments. The de minimis exemption existed for a reason. It acknowledged that the administrative cost of collecting duties on small items was impractical. By removing it, the administration has created a massive new workload for United States Customs and Border Protection, and attempted to shift much of that burden onto foreign postal services. As Teitelbaum explained, this approach is destined to create bottlenecks, delays, increased costs that will ultimately be passed down to consumers and small businesses who are the least equipped to handle them. The Trump administration has defended the drastic policy change as a crucial measure for both national security and economic fairness. The primary justification cited for invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act was the fight against the smuggling of illegal substances, particularly fentanyl and other illicit drugs. The White House declared that the influx of this deadly synthetic opioid, primarily from China and Mexico, constituted a national emergency. Administration officials argued that drug traffickers were exploiting the de minimis exemption to ship small, high-potency quantities of fentanyl and other illicit drugs directly to buyers in the United States through the mail system, making them difficult to detect among the millions of legitimate packages. By eliminating the duty-free threshold, the administration contends that every package entering the country will now be subject to greater scrutiny. The theory is that requiring formal customs declarations and potential duties on all imports will create a more detailed data trail for law enforcement and customs officials. This would, in theory, make it easier to identify suspicious shipments and intercept illegal goods before they reach American communities. Looking ahead, the landscape for international e-commerce is fraught with uncertainty. For consumers and small businesses, adaptation will be key. Preparing for this new normal means accepting that the world of online shopping has changed, and navigating it will require more patience, planning, and a closer eye on the total cost of every cross-border transaction.